But Shan, I mean, it's interesting. This woman lives there. She says she sees no crisis. She's lived there for 40 years. And the opioid epidemic, according to Homeland Security, the vast majority of opioids and heroin and fentanyl and other things comes through legal points of entry.
Right. Ms. Alvarez's testimony seems devastating to me. If I was a lawyer on the other side, I'd be talking settlement after just listening to what she said. The problem for the president here, from a legal strategy point of view, I mean, Michael's right. He can invoke the act, certainly, and then the question immediately turns to what does he need to do to prove that he properly has invoked the act? And there's no definition for national emergency. I mean, some of that might be common sense because most people can agree when there's an emergency. Perhaps the lawyers will be digging through legislative history to look at what kind of debate went on to define that. But the act does allow for Congress to say, no, we disagree with the joint resolution. The president will probably veto that if Congress does that. And now everything is teed up perfectly for the court battle. And in the court battle, if I were the president's lawyers, I want it to be legal. I don't want any facts. I want to speed through on strictly legal grounds, get to the D.C. Circuit, get to Supreme Court. However, on the other side, you want those facts. You think the president has no facts, and of course, facts will delay things. Litigation takes time. It could literally take years if they actually go to trial. So that's some of the high-level strategy on both sides.
Kirsten, how damaging do you think it was for the president to say that he didn't have to do this, even while making an announcement about a national emergency, which would seem to be the definition of something you have to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely would undermine the idea that it was a national emergency. But I don't know in terms of how that will affect him in the courts. And, you know, Jeffrey Toobin was saying earlier today that he feels like he could possibly be successful. So, you know, I think this is another example of Donald Trump just having no regard for sort of the norms of society. And so, yes, it's true that it hasn't been defined, but partly because I think we operate on the assumption that people are really going to behave in good faith, that the presidents that we elect are going to follow some basic norms. And one of them would be not creating a manufactured crisis and then declaring a national emergency. I think that this is something that is really out of bounds, that today when he was pressed on where he gets his facts, he doesn't feel any need to really provide that information. He invoked El Paso as an example and even said, well, I asked people there what they thought if the wall helped, and they said it did. Well, all the statistics show the opposite. The Republican mayor of El Paso has said he needs to stop saying the things he's saying about El Paso, and yet he continues with this. And so nobody's disputing that the President of the United States has the authority to declare a national emergency. What people are disputing is that you can just make up a problem, have a policy disagreement, and then not get the funding from Congress, and then declare a national emergency. Whether it's legal or not, it's highly problematic.
Michael, if the next president comes around, whenever, and if that president, say, is a Democrat and declares climate change a national emergency and therefore, wants to allocate military spending and spending from all sorts of reasons, can you then make the argument that he doesn't have the power to do, or she doesn't have the power to do that?
I think we're going to test this in the courts, I guess. We've had almost 60 of these things since the act was passed and signed in 1976. I bet nobody among us and none of the viewers could really think of any of the other 55 of them, right? And we also understand that,
I mean, certainly you could name some of them. I mean, Iran-Contra.
We also know that George W. Bush and Barack Obama have deployed the military to the border. We've had, governors down there who have declared states of emergency on the border before. I mean, this has been done before, but really in the end, I guess it was Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson who talked about how the president draws his authority from, where their agreement waxes and wanes from disjunction and conjunction with Congress, and they're at their maximum authority when they're in agreement with Congress. And right now, the president is at a nadir of his authority, really, because he's up against Congress. And I think it's when, at these weak points in the presidency, when arguments in the court are really very important. We're going to find out what a state of emergency really means, and that'll mean something to every president in the future.
Shan, do you think he would win if down at the Supreme Court?
I think that is in doubt because if we're analyzing the Supreme Court from the point of view of their potential conservative politics, this is not a conservative issue in my mind. His power,
Right.
And unlike some of the cultural issues that go on. And I think there's actually going to be a lot of legal clues as to which way the different courts will go because there's a lot that will lead up to this. For example, right away someone could seek to have a preliminary injunction against it, and that standard is a likelihood of success, substantial likelihood of success. Which way a court rules on that is going to start to give hints about which way this is going to go in the future. So there are going to be a lot of tests. I mean, there's going to be a firestorm for the White House adding to all the other legal troubles that they have to defend against. And this is not ending anytime soon because there are multiple ways to attack his action legally.
Kirsten, I mean, even if it doesn't pass in the courts, there is political advantage in the move for the president. He can say to his supporters, look, I went to the wall for this. I tried my hardest, and, these courts stopped me, but, I did my best.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that, frankly, both the bases of both parties want to see more of that, right, from the leaders. They feel like they come, they get elected, and then they start sort of following the system, and they don't fight for the things that they said they were going to fight for. And so I think that is something that will resonate with his base the same way in the Democratic base it would resonate when you're really fighting. So, but the substance of this is what's so problematic, is that it's just he doesn't have the facts on his side.
Kirsten Powers, Michael Caputo, thank you very much. Shan, stick around if you would.